In the late 19th century, the arrival of the Santa Fe Railroad transformed the high pine country of northern Arizona. By 1882, a new town had taken root at the base of the San Francisco Peaks. A rugged settlement born of sawmills, rail ties, and opportunity, this town was Flagstaff. As trains rolled in and timber rolled out, Flagstaff quickly grew around the rhythm of industry and frontier life. One of the first and most popular establishments to open its doors was the San Juan Saloon. Founded by entrepreneur John N. Barry on Railroad Avenue, today known as Route 66, the San Juan became more than a bar. With its ideal location just steps from the train, it served as a social hub, a business center, and a gathering place for locals and travelers alike. Barry brought in an elegant upright piano and hired a professional musician to perform nightly. Soon the saloon came alive with waltz, ragtime, and parlor tunes echoing off walls adorned with Navajo rugs and mounted game. Barry proudly declared, "If you want to hear good music, go to the San Juan." Over time, the saloon grew into an all-hour social hub. It featured a barbershop run at various times by characters like Billy the Barber. There was also a lunch counter serving fresh oysters, steaks, chocolates, and other delicacies brought in on the train. Barry himself offered fine cigars, imported wines and spirits, and like any good saloon, plenty of gambling. Every old-timer in Flagstaff knew Jack Akers. Genial, gentlemanly, and sharp with the faro box. Jack dealt cards at the San Juan, where he ran a straight game, and Barry kept the whiskey flowing. One dusty afternoon, a long, lean man in a dirty hat and scraggly beard began hanging around the saloon, quietly watching the play. Word spread that the stranger was William Wentworth, a cattle baron from Gila County and one of the richest men in Arizona. That evening, Jack set up his faro game and waited. The cattleman came in, ordered a whiskey, and studied the layout. Wentworth asked, "What's your limit?" $25, Jack replied. "What's your chips worth?" "Reds, 50 cents. Blues, 2.5. "And them whites?" 10 cents, Jack admitted. "Well then," said the cattle king, tossing down a quarter, "give me one of your whites." For a long moment, the room went still. Jack stared at the chip, then at the man, and slowly stood. With great drama, he turned over the faro box, removed his dealer's visor, and announced, "Gentlemen of Flagstaff, I've lived among you as a free man, enjoying your company and the blessings of frontier liberty. I never complained when a miner bet his last dollar and walked away with 25 cents. But when the cattle king of Arizona coppers the ace for a 10-cent chip, I know my time here is done. Tonight, I take the midnight train east. I long for the effete civilization of the cities where a banker's pride can still survive." And that was everyday life in an 1880s Arizona town like Flagstaff. Passing time in the saloon, listening to music, playing cards, and chasing big dreams in cattle or lumber or trains or whatever opportunity came along. The success of the San Juan Saloon put John Barry in just the right position to make it big himself. By 1886, Barry had expanded his ventures beyond the saloon. He launched a broker's office to handle land deals and business accounts, laying the groundwork for his future bank. His success and popularity around town led to a run for county sheriff that same year. Around the same time, John married a beautiful Irish woman named May. Together, they welcomed their son Newton, one of the first children born in the young town of Flagstaff. Life was good. The saloon was thriving, the town was growing, and the San Juan stood at the center of it all. But life on the frontier was never without risk. As a saloon owner, John lived and worked among rough men, rowdy drinkers, and the ever-present threat of trouble where tempers and whiskey often mixed. One Sunday night, a man named Gustav Shield had been drinking heavily and looking for a fight. He finally found the target, a smaller man named Thomas Drury. When Shield lunged, Drury struck back, and with a single blow, Shield fell, hit his head on the ground, and never moved again. By morning, a coroner ruled the cause of death a broken neck. The entire fight had lasted only seconds, but it was a chilling reminder that in 1880s Arizona, life could be lost in an instant. The death of Gustav Shield was just one example of how fast things could turn deadly in the West. But as brutal as that Sunday had been, no one could have predicted what would happen next. Only a few years later, violence would strike even closer to home, this time inside the San Juan Saloon itself. On January 17th, 1887, a cowboy named William Lamb staggered into the San Juan around 10 p.m. The cowboy was drunk, loud, and quarrelsome. When Lamb interrupted a card game with his singing, an onlooker named George Hawks shouted, "Shut up!" Lamb exploded into an abusive tirade until he was thrown out of the saloon. The night calmed down until just after 1 a.m. when Lamb returned, still drunk and looking to confront George Hawks. As the two men faced off, George's younger brother William slipped him a pistol. Now armed, the Hawks brothers turned on Lamb and pistol whipped him. Chaos broke out. As the crowd scattered, John Barry rushed over to break up the fight. While George Hawks was pinned down by a local known as the California Kid, Barry tried to wrestle the gun away. In the struggle, the pistol went off. The bullet struck Barry in the shoulder and tore through his torso. He collapsed in agony as the Hawk brothers fled into the night. John Barry lingered for nearly 5 hours before dying from this wound. The next morning, George Hawks was arrested in bed, and William Hawks was soon picked up as an accessory. They were both locked in Flagstaff's crude frontier jail with armed guards outside. But justice would not wait. That night, a masked mob of about 20 vigilantes gathered in silence. Armed and anonymous, they marched through the dark streets and surrounded the jail. There, they ordered the guards to lay down their weapons. 2 vigilantes forced the guards to face the fence while the rest entered the jail. No one knows exactly what happened inside, but the guards heard George Hawks plead his innocence, followed by a scuffle, then a volley of gunshots. Moments later, a voice from the mob yelled for the guards to scatter, and the night was over. The next day, Flagstaff held 3 funerals. And while the Hawks brothers were mourned by their family, the entire town grieved for the loss of John Barry, and the newspapers wrote, "He was one of the best-hearted and most liberal men to be found, and those who had been the recipients of his generosity are numbered by hundreds in this locality." Consequently, the grief at his untimely and violent death was so general that almost every house was a scene of mourning. There were 2 official inquests. The first, into the death of John Barry, was held the same evening he died. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts, there was no clear shooter, and the case was ongoing. The second, held the next day, and that addressed the deaths of George and William Hawks. Justice J.Y. Crothers presided over a jury of 12 local citizens, and the only testimony came from those disarmed guards. The jury brought back a verdict that read, "Death by pistol shots from some unknown persons." No names were named, no one was prosecuted, and the case and the whole incident was closed. The Hawks brothers were never proven guilty of killing John Barry, but the inquest into their own deaths went no further, likely because the vigilantes were known men from town and no one would speak against them. So in practice, it wasn't a verdict from a court, it was the community delivering punishment and then collectively turning a blind eye. Even with a sheriff, a jury, and a legal process in place, justice in 1880s Arizona could still be personal, immediate, and outside of the law. For a town that loved John Barry, its bartender, banker, and friend, that justice was enough. This was the true story of John Barry and the San Juan Saloon, a tale drawn straight from the pages of Flagstaff's early newspapers. While it marked the end of John Barry's life, it was only the beginning of another remarkable chapter. I first uncovered the story while researching John's younger brother, the man who would go on to build the first hotel at Grand Canyon, Pete Barry. John's tragic death set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to the creation of one of America's most iconic destinations, Grand Canyon National Park. Join me in part 2, where we will continue the story of the Barry family, going from saloon fights and frontiers to the national parks themselves. and explore how Pete Barry helped shape the Grand Canyon's early history. Like and subscribe to keep the story going, and I hope to see you in the next chapter.